Welcome to this new edition of Eco Africa, brought to you by Germany's DW, Nigeria's Channels Television, and Uganda's NTV, represented on the show by my wonderful co-presenter, Sandra.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris, and a very wonderful day to you too. Well, nice to see you all, and today we've got a wonderful show, so let's start with a quick look at what we have coming up. How a man in Uganda has found a way to put used diapers to good use. The positive impact shellfish have on climate change. And why some consumers and farmers in Germany are giving farming a rethink.
But first, the bushmeat trade has come under fire in recent years. One reason is the rise in disease transmission between animals and humans. But there are also very serious concerns about endangered species. Several countries have now banned the hunting, selling and consumption of bushmeat.
That is right, Chris, and indeed it is good for the animals. But the bigger question is, what happened to those people whose livelihoods once depended on the wildlife trade? How have they been impacted by such bans? Now, our first report takes us to Liberia to find out.
This young dwarf crocodile had a lucky escape. It was rescued 3.5 months ago. Now Bayan Borbor is releasing it back into the wild. He is the conservation manager at Liberia's first general wildlife sanctuary. Before he started this job, he too would have seen crocodiles as a source of food. Now he's returned hundreds of animals to their natural habitats.
When I was growing up, I had the common view of all Liberians. Eating bushmeat is like a custom or a tradition. But growing up and going to school, learning about conservation and getting into the field, working with wildlife, it has changed everything. My current state is to motivate people or to bring about change in communities and to schools and even in the villages where most of these animals come from.
The forests, mangroves and rivers of Liberia are a global biodiversity hotspot with hundreds of different species of birds, mammals, reptiles and plants. A few years ago, Liberia passed a law banning the sale and consumption of bushmeat. The aim is to preserve biodiversity and prevent the spread of disease.
Okay, and we make it warm.
The Libasa Wildlife Sanctuary outside the capital Monrovia was founded in 2017. The staff here care for a huge variety of wildlife. Most of the animals were confiscated by Forestry Development Authority from people involved in the now illegal bushmeat trade.
Sanctuary is absolutely imperative to Liberia. The wildlife law came and got changed in 2016, and when the law is enforced, they have to have somewhere to bring these animals that are relinquished. Most of the animals here are actually orphans, and this little bushbuck is a prime example. Came in at 350 grams, which is the weight that it would be while it was when it was born. So there is a 99% chance that its mother had actually been killed for bushmeat, and the little one was left.
With nearly 70% of Liberia's population living in a close proximity to the country's dense forests, bushmeat was incredibly popular. The most common animals targeted were pangolins, along with several species of monkeys. Comfort Davis sold bushmeat in Monrovia's markets for over 20 years, but today she has become a national advocate for the country's wildlife and biodiversity.
And we're talking with the women and we're talking with other people to stop trading the bushmeat, because it won't be fine for we the Liberians. If we continue to trade bushmeat, our forest will be empty and will not be good for us.
According to the Worldwide Fund for Nature, Liberians used to get more than 75% of their protein from bushmeat. Much of it was sold at local markets where most people here get their food. Etta Nyema also sold bushmeat for many years. But after working with Comfort, she switched to selling fish, which benefits her and her family.
When we were selling the bushmeat, there was a risk. We used to go far distances. But now the fish I'm selling, no stretch inside. I'm selling both fresh fish and dry fish. We're going to go far out again. Even if I don't want to go buy, I can send my children or my grandchildren to go and buy my fish.
Comfort deficit advocacy looks to be paying off. A study was conducted on the prevalence of bushmeat being traded at the markets across the country. It found that in a single year, there was a 50% reduction in bushmeat. But despite these positive results, there are still challenges.
This market is no longer selling bushmeat, but we have so many markets in Liberia, dozens of markets, thousands of markets in Liberia, and then the Liberians are solely depending on bushmeat. So it takes time.
All change takes time, but awareness is half the battle. And any reduction could give critical endangered animals like this white-bellied tree pangolin and countless other species a fighting chance. The progress made in Liberia shows the effort is worthwhile to ensure the long-term survival of many diverse and beautiful species.
It's great to see nature preserved. Another huge challenge in today's world is all the waste we create and how to dispose it of or recycle it in a way that doesn't put a burden on the environment. Now, human waste is no exception here. But before you poo-poo that idea, we want you to take a look at an interesting project right here at home in Uganda that is making the most of this undervalued natural resource. Here is this week's Doing Your Bit.
Can a business be built on baby poop? Well, entrepreneur Patrick Majusi thinks so. Babies go through 5 to 7 diapers a day on average. But in Kampala's Komocho settlement, most dirty diapers end up on massive garbage heaps around town. Now Patrick Majusi's team goes out and collects the diapers. After separating the organic material from the plastic parts, the plastic becomes a component in the construction of urgently needed community toilets.
This is the first ever Wildies compost diaper toilet. So, together with the 200 women, vulnerable women in the Kamocha slum, we picked and sorted and packed the little diapers and fixed them into the bottles to form tough bricks. Now the other poo-poo part of it, the other waste part of it, of the diaper, the cotton, the poo-poo, is put into the compost to make the best fertilizer, which is organic.
The baby poop is mixed with clay and local tree seeds, and then rolled into balls and dried. Patrick Majusi then sells the seed balls to tourists keen to do their bit for the local environment. And, with a bit of luck, the seeds will help trees grow far and wide.
And how about you? If you're also doing your bit, tell us about it. Visit our website or send us a tweet. #DoingYourBit. We share your stories.
That's certainly a novel way of getting seeds into the ground and a pretty clever business model, considering it is based on free and endless supply of raw materials.
Well, that's true, Sandra. Too bad I didn't think of it myself when my kids were younger. Now, speaking of sowing seeds, in many parts of the world, industrial farming has taken a serious toll on biodiversity. Many crops are now also struggling in the face of climate change. In Germany, some consumers are calling for a general rethink of agriculture. And a number of farmers actually agree with them.
An early morning wash at Eckei Farm in the Sauerland region of western Germany. Today, Wilhelm Eckei doesn't have to look after his animals alone. Alexandra Mustapic and Ines König are here to help for a weekend. They've only just arrived, but are already hard at work. They want to learn more about the practical challenges faced by farmers.
I work in the food industry and would like to continue down this path in the future. And I wanted to get to know the whole food industry from its roots.
I'm self-employed in the catering industry, and I work with products from the food industry. I wanted to know where they're made, where they come from, and how much work actually goes into them.
The farm has been in the family for 150 years. It covers 70 hectares of land and has pigs, cows, and chickens. While not an organic farm, Wilhelm Eckei is big on sustainable methods and animal welfare. Unlike on many farms, the pigs can move freely in their stall and an outdoor area. But of course, the animals will still be slaughtered.
I'm not the kind of person who says that I can't eat them now that I see them. It's actually just the opposite once you see they have a good life.
There's always lots to do. Raising livestock is an important part of the farm's income. In addition to around 300 pigs, there are also 40 cows. But the farmer has no plans to increase his livestock.
Es werden zu viele Schweine und Geflügel gehalten.
In Germany, we keep too many pigs and poultry. We produce more meat than we can consume, and that's not good for anyone.
So he decided to take a different path. In 1989, Wilhelm Eckei's farm was the first in Germany to adopt stricter animal welfare rules. These include free roaming for livestock all year round, the use of straw, and plenty of space in the stalls, unlike industrial agriculture.
We have to move towards more regional farming and regional marketing, where we produce for the needs of our population and under conditions that are approved, ecological and sustainable.
The work continues for the two women. Next, they have to collect eggs from the chicken coop. The farm has more than 1,200 hens.
I've never collected eggs like this. Oh, it's warm.
It's really fresh.
Is it farming that needs to change or something else?
I think the problem is overconsumption, the constant unnecessary demand from consumers. If we could just reduce that, then there'd be no problem. Then people would just be satisfied with what's available.
So both consumers and farmers need to change. But how much change is realistic? The two women raised the issue during the coffee break.
Not to completely turn back the clock, but people joining forces to work together again.
A sharing system.
Exactly.
You can think of all sorts of things, including new farms, small farms that are managed sensibly by several generations, or a farm with a baker, a butcher, or handicraft business. In our market economy, the decisive factor is always whether something's profitable, whether the prospects for making money are so good that there are courageous people who'll do it.
Wilhelm Eckei has that courage and has invested in new mobile outbuildings for his chickens.
We're actually getting 3 of these in total. They cost a lot of money, so of course it's not something you do when you're 60, but our son said he's more interested in poultry.
So the future of the farm is looking secure, and the sustainability concept of the past 30 years is set to continue.
Eggs and meat are 2 sources of protein. Another excellent source is seafood. But once again, it seems industrial fishing has caused more harm than good. Not only is species loss a huge problem, stocks are also dwindling at an alarming rate. The good news is that fishers are increasingly discovering ways of farming seafood more sustainably. Here is one example of that from Italy.
It's an icy 7 o'clock in the morning in Goro, and the harbor here on the Po Delta is draped in a thick fog. For Vadis Paesanti, that doesn't make setting out any easier.
You try to navigate by orienting yourself to certain landmarks. But on mornings like this, when the fog, which we call caligo, is so thick, it makes navigating difficult. Very difficult.
His father fished the Adriatic before him, but today, Vadis harvests clams, vongole. Where and how much they can net changes every day.
In the evening, we get a message from the cooperative telling us what zone we can fish, when we can set out, and when we have to return, and how much we can bring ashore.
They glide for a half an hour through the silent lagoon. Then suddenly, the quiet ends. The clam fishers appear from the fog like ghosts. 1,500 men and women work the Goro Lagoon. Vadis finally reaches his assigned zone. It's not deep, but it is cold.
It's the only way to warm up your hands when they're cold.
Clam fishing is more like farming the seabed than traditional fishing. The Goro fishers harvest almost 14,000 tons of mollusks each year.
Today we can all harvest 30 kilos.
They suck the mollusks out of the sand with a special device. The water is 6 degrees Celsius, just right for winter. But in recent years, the temperature has stayed around 11 degrees Celsius. Climate change is also affecting the Po Delta.
We observe the effects of climate change here when the sea level changes, when the Scirocco wind blows, or during the phases of the moon. We also see the effect of climate change when we find fish, mollusk, and crab species that we've never seen here before.
That's why clam farming is important, he says, to help protect the climate.
The shells are made of calcium carbonate, which is just captured carbon dioxide.
At the University of Ferrara, Professor Elena Tamburini has authored a study on the impact of mussels on the climate. It confirms the Goro fishers' argument.
As they grow, mollusks form a shell, and that captures CO2. If I harvest a kilo of clams, the CO2 emitted for their commercial use is much less than the CO2 captured by the clam shells as they grow. That's the surprising thing.
In the lagoon, the Goro fishers now farm a dozen mollusk species over 10 square kilometers. 7 years ago, Vadis and the other fishers launched another climate-friendly project, farming oysters from the Mediterranean using the tides.
We're the only oyster producers in Italy. Now it's low tide, and these baskets with the young oysters are hanging in the air and the sun. When the tide comes in, this entire zone will be flooded. Very nice. They're from 2020.
The fishers call their oysters golden Goro and sell them to top chefs all over Italy. But above all, Vadis loves one thing about his work.
It's that sense of freedom. You follow the ebb and flow of the tides and the phases of the moon. You're part of this beautiful world, our world, the Po Delta.
Preserving this world and ensuring its future, for Vadis and the fishers of Goro, it's their life's work.
Back to Africa now. The ongoing climate crisis is forcing us to be more frugal with our most important resources. You guess it, water. In Lagos, less than 40% of people have access to clean drinking water. The situation is similar in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, where the poorest residents live in terrible conditions. Now, a private sector initiative is introducing innovative technical solutions to help them.
Just one touch of the sensor and clean water flows from the machine. It's changed Beryl Akinji's life.
The water we get is clean, affordable and easily accessible.
Beryl Akinji has lived all her life in Mathare, one of the biggest slums in Nairobi. Those 22 years have been governed by a daily struggle for clean water. She had to walk long distances to a water point, in constant fear of being attacked or getting sick from the water.
The dirty water gives people diarrhea. They drink it untreated because they have no other option.
500,000 people live in Mathare in very close quarters. Settlements like this one keep growing, and so does the need for water.
The cities are exploding, we are unplanned, you have more and more people coming from the countryside, settling down in the cities, in slums that are not on the map of water providers, so they are not getting water.
Anne Bousquet from UN Habitat sees another problem.
There is a backlog of infrastructure development over the years. The water companies, the government have not invested enough to maintain the pipes. So we have very old water networks that are leaking.
And on top of that, cartels often control the taps. They may charge extortionate prices or sexually exploit young women for water. Beryl Akinji feels safe now that she can get her water from the machine. It's charged at a fixed rate and she doesn't need to carry cash.
If I have 10 Kenyan shillings on my chip, that lasts me up to 3 days. Before, I could only get 3 jerry cans of water for that money.
The users receive about 10 times as much water for their money now. Kenneth Wendo from the supplier Maji Maleli had his work cut out trying to convince water companies and authorities to back the idea.
When we started this technology was not very popular. So I think one of the biggest impact is to get organizations, entities to think about technology. We are introducing technology which is being taken up very quickly. One of the things we see now is with the adoption of the prepaid water ATM, service delivery is becoming more efficient.
Low operating costs were one of Wendo's main arguments. Staff are only required for maintenance. And this has actually helped to diffuse conflicts in some places.
There are areas where tribal conflicts are affecting how people consume water. So if you are, let's say, from tribe A, you cannot fetch water from tribe B because the kiosk attendant prevents you from fetching that water. Now this doesn't happen. People are served indiscriminately.
The technology comes from Enschede in the Netherlands. Anton Lepelaar was working in Africa for an aid project when he came up with an idea to better regulate the water supply.
Once the user presents his token, the valve will open and the flow meter will measure the amount of water. There's a GSM modem inside, an SD card to store all the transactions.
The machines send data on consumption to the cloud. This allows supply and demand to be regulated.
You see all the systems in Mathare, and then here you can see the revenue for one water point.
There are already around 800 of these pay-as-you-go water dispensers in Kenya and some neighbouring countries. Fortunately, there's been very little vandalism so far. Beryl Akinji comes here several times a day. She says that with this new clean water supply, stomach upsets are a thing of the past.
We've come to the end of this edition of Eco Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do come back again next week. Until then, I am Chris Alem saying goodbye from Ogun State, Nigeria.
Well, before I sign off, I do want to remind you to please check in with us anytime on our social media platforms. Let us know your thoughts on this week's show. Until we meet again, it is a goodbye from me, Sandra Twinobidio, here in Kampala, Uganda. Take care.